This time about the topic hourly rate or project price. As freelancers, we are often in between those two when we have to make a compelling offer to our clients. And I hope after this session, it will be clear or more easy to make a choice between those two. So let's dive in. A few weeks ago, I needed a haircut, as you can see. So I went to the hairdresser. Normally, it's a 15-minute job, but due to COVID, of course, and I'm located in Germany, there were many hairdressers closed, actually all of them, and this was the result. So what normally takes 15 minutes actually took 1 hour and 2 hairdressers. Yeah? But okay, even though that was surprising, what surprised me the most was that I paid the same price. So when I left the hairdresser, I thought, oh wow, whether it takes 15 minutes or an hour, I pay the same price. So obviously the hairdresser works with a project fee. And I must admit here, the after picture is probably not one of my best pictures, but we'll look over that. No? So it got me thinking on my way home, what would change, or what if hairdressers would really work by hourly rate? What would that be, or what would that make of a difference? And maybe you can add something in the comments if you think about you as a client, or maybe even as a hairdresser. What would be different? Because on my way home, I was fantasizing about that. And yeah, indeed, Lily, it would hurt your wallet. Yeah? I remember that my ex-wife used to like going to the hairdresser for like 4 hours or 5 hours. Maybe that would change. Yeah, 4 hours long, indeed. I think that is still impressive. Yeah. But also, how would you sit there as a client in the chair if you know that, yeah, you actually are paying per hourly rate and you have a hairdresser that is kind of clumsy or a little bit slow? Would that make a difference in experience? And as a balding man, can we move this along, please? Fast, yes. I was thinking maybe all the projects would be the same, that all men would just go and have the haircut with the razor machine to make it just fast. So there are actually some parameters to think about if we change to project fee of hourly rate. And those are what I call the 3 pieces of the puzzle. You have the project in itself, you have the client, and you have the freelancer. And those are actually 3 pieces of the puzzle you need to fit together. So let's first start to look at them one by one, and at the end we can put the pieces together. So first, the project. Now, it might already be clear if you have a project that it's definitely an hourly rate or a project price. Imagine that you have a project in front of you and you have no experience with, but you would like to do it. Then you are more inclined to go towards the hourly rate. At the basis of this is actually when you are uncertain, especially as a new freelancer, for example, you want to be paid by the time you invest. So that's why new freelancers or starting freelancers often choose hourly rate, and they progress towards project price. So whenever something is uncertain, we are more inclined to go to hourly rate. So if you don't have any experience, you're probably better off with making an hourly rate, because then you are certain you are getting paid for the work that you put in. Sometimes when you have a talk with a client and you have a project in front of you, you have that gut feeling that there is more work to it than you might suspect at first sight. Also, this is a case where uncertainty rules and you might prefer an hourly rate above a project price. And of course, when there's time-consuming work, I used to work as a laminate flooring installer, and whenever I saw a square floor, I was really happy. And I made a project price because I know this goes fast. But if it's in a house with lots of corners and difficult to reach places, I know that's a time-consuming work, and I switch to an hourly rate price. So that might be a good reason to go for that option. Vice versa, if you have actually fast work in front of you, work that you actually made easy for you, so you are you have optimized your processes, you would be punishing yourself to invoice per hourly rate. You can, of course, say, yeah, then up your price, make it a more expensive hourly rate, but then you might outprice yourself, and then hence you switch to the project price. If you have a really well-defined scope, then a project price might be better as well. What do I mean by that? If the client really says, okay, this is the result I want, is really well defined, I don't even care how you do it, I just want the work to be done, then you might be easier with a project price. So this is what you consider while looking at the first piece of the puzzle, the project. The second one is the client. Again, we have the diversification, hourly rate, project price. And if you are talking with a client, you sometimes can feel that the client doesn't have any clear expectations, or that he's looking for a solution, but doesn't really know what that solution really is. Again, uncertainty, and it might make it difficult for you to have a clear estimation of the amount of time that you are going to put in. And then again, you will probably be better off with an hourly rate instead of a project price. Depending on your client, it might be that he or she is searching for a first cooperation, a kind of an example task to see how are we standing. And in that case, it might also be good to both invest in an hourly rate so that you know how much time you can invest for a certain task, and vice versa, how he knows how much a task actually would cost, and then you can still proceed towards a project price. When a client has a defined budget, so when he has a budget that he doesn't want to go over, then it's actually interesting to work with a project price, because if you choose hourly rate, then you have an open ending. You might say, okay, this is 10 hours, I'm pretty sure of it, but still there's that uncertainty factor for the client that you might go over his budget. Whereas if you present a project price, then you know it's either underneath it or it's above it. Makes it very clear. Another reason why I switch to a project price, if the client wants a continuous cooperation. What do I mean? If he or she is actually giving me more than one task, and probably recurring tasks, then I want to give I want to get the client free of decision making, because one of the things that is involved when hourly rate is in play is that the client each time has to go through the decision: do I pay for this or do I not pay for this? Because that is actually where he's thinking about when sending this task to you. And if you have a project price, then it's actually, yeah, just give me the task, it's in the budget. So project price would be here a monthly fee or so. Can be very interesting for virtual assistant work to switch to a project price, and have in mind that if the workload becomes too much, there's always a way of communication. So this is the second piece of the puzzle, and part 3 is, of course, the freelancer itself, which is you, and probably the most important part of the puzzle, because it is you who decides to choose hourly rate or a project price. Again, if you are new to the business, you probably have a small portfolio. It might be more easy to go for an hourly rate based upon the estimation, or the fact that you cannot make a clear estimation when you get a task or a certain assignment. But also in the showcasing in your talk to the client, it might be easier to talk about an hourly rate if you don't have a portfolio to show for. If you have more experience, then you have actually that vibe, that confidence towards your client, which shows that you know what you're talking about, and you can offer a project price that will be more believable than in case you would have a small portfolio. But what I consider more important is the line underneath. How big is your confidence in order to propose either a project price or an hourly rate? Because you need to have a system that is comfortable, that is working for you. Otherwise, you have that kind of uncertain feeling and you project that on your client, or you might project that on your client while talking or while presenting an offer. And that's always a kind of barrier that sits in between you two. So make sure that you are really comfortable with what you offer. So those are actually the three pieces of the puzzle. And I want you to consider a few things when thinking about hourly rate or project price, common pitfalls, because I've been in that position quite often that I say that we have some kind of a deal, and then suddenly something comes up and I think, oh no, what do I need to do with that? So if you present an hourly rate, did you consider travel expenses? What do you do with short meetings? Are these included, or is this a service of the house, or do you make those into billable hours? What about phone calls and 5-minute tasks? We've been there as well. How do you handle 5-minute tasks? Do you count them together and hope that you achieve something close to an hour? Or is there kind of a rule that you say, look, 5-minute task, that is automatically 15 minutes of my time? You need to be transparent about that, or think about that at least on forehand. What about raise options? Yeah? The more you get experienced, the more value you will give. And at a certain point, you will have, or you will want to raise your price. Out of personal experience, I think it's easier to raise your prices when you work with project prices than with an hourly rate, because that is quite confronting as well. Again, put yourself into the mind of the client, and if you raise your hourly rate, that means that every task he is sending or delegating towards you, it is actually paying more. And if it's a project price, yeah, it's a one-time fee or something like that, that is higher, but it doesn't matter how many tasks he or she sends you. That's a big difference in thinking in the mind of the client. So that's why raising is actually easier when you have a project price than hourly rate. What do you do with different tasks? It might be that certain tasks are not, and I'm not speaking about time, but really about energy, that you have to put in a big effort that is actually more expensive than a normal task. How do you do that? Do you consider the same price, or have you another system in place? What do you do with urgent tasks? Tasks that really disrupt your planning and it needs to be done. Do you have a different price for that, or is that the same? So these are all things you want to think about when you present your offer. Same counts for project price. I've noticed that if you use a project price, they are more prone to negotiation. So do you build in a buffer, or do you have a strategy that you know, okay, this is my price and I won't negotiate, this is the limit? A difficult thing about project prices is, of course, the scope. Is the well-defined? Because what do you do with tasks that are not within the scope? A project price is normally all-inclusive, but if something is really falling out of that scope, you need to think about that on forehand. What about a timeline or a deadline? If you have a clear timeline for a project price, that is really, really important, because imagine you're working on a project and you give the end result and the hope of, okay, this project is finished and now I can make my invoice. And the client says, oh, I'm sorry, but this is not what I expected. Yes, you need to change that, which means in the worst case that you have to start completely over. That is your project price actually divided to 2 or multiplied by 2, depending on how you look at it. So you don't want to be in that situation. No? And to avoid that, you need to have a communication system, especially with a project price. How are you going to communicate with your client? How often? And together with that, combine that with when to invoice what. So especially with bigger projects, you need to know, I will start invoicing the first day, then halfway the project, and then at the end of the project. Make a system, make sure it's clear so that the customer is not surprised when you get an invoice. So these are the common pitfalls that you really need to think about, whether it's hourly rate or project price. And then I want you to look at those three pieces of the puzzle as a communicating system, like communicating vessels, because sometimes it is so clear that one influences the other. They all influences all the others at the same time. But let's say what I mean with this is, imagine you have a project and it's so time consuming, you know, this will be an hourly rate project. Yeah. This will have an influence on the client and on you. It might be that you are really not up for hourly rate projects because it is a lot of administration and it doesn't suit you. In this case, you're better off saying, yeah, I'm sorry, but I don't take this project. I will forward it to somebody else or so. Imagine that your client really wants to work with an hourly rate while you want to work with a project price. These are communicating systems, so it might be that one already is decisive for the whole process. And the key is to find balance. How do we find balance? To keep it simple and transparent. First of all, it's your job as a freelancer to gather information, and as an expert freelancer to define the true solution for your client, to make sure that you know exactly what the end result will be, how you are going to get there, and it's your task to know everything about it. But it's also your task to get to know the client. Does he prefer one kind of system above the other? Why does he need a solution? All that you need to take into account. Take all those pieces together at home, take it with you, and then put them together and add your piece as well at home, because you might have a preference. Yeah, you are the expert. You know exactly, okay, for this project, this is the best solution. And only then you can make a clear offer and make the calculations, do the hard work for the client. Too often, I get an offer where I still look at it and I have to decipher everything. It takes me almost half an hour to get an idea how much it would cost me in the end of the project. There are so many things that I need to add up myself, or how do you say it, exceptions to the rule or whatever, that I think, oh my God, how am I ever going to know how much this actually will cost me? So make a clear offer, and you have to do that because then it will make sense to you. And the moment it makes sense to you, you have the words to explain it to your client so that it makes sense to him or her as well. And then communicate that. I would invoice 5,000 euros per month because I don't need to take into account, or I don't need to register all the hours, so that you can keep sending me all the tasks without having to think, is this something for Frederik? Do I need to send him or not? I just ship it to him. So communicate what's in it for the client. Show him or her that you've also taken him into the equation. So keep it simple and transparent, and look at all the three pieces and fit them together. So quite fast, I think, but yeah, this is what I wanted to say. Feel free to contact me, of course. Like always, I would like to meet each and every one of you.